first time my backyard flooded, Brad Collins stood on his brand new concrete patio with a cup of coffee in his hand and told me the problem was my lawn. Rain was coming down so hard it looked white under the porch lights. Water was pushing across my flower beds, swallowing the walkway and pooling against the foundation of my house. My sump pump was running non-stop in the basement, kicking on every few seconds like it was fighting for its life. I was outside in a rain jacket, soaked through my jeans, dragging sandbags toward the basement door, while muddy water kept rising around my shoes. And Brad just stood there, dry under his new patio cover, looking down at me like I was entertainment. "You should fix your drainage," he called over the fence. I looked past him at the wide slab of concrete he had poured the week before.
Miss Davis,
it stretched from the back of his house almost to the property line.
We need to discuss the modifications
smooth,
within the drainage
expensive-looking,
easement.
and completely wrong. Because that patio sat directly over the drainage line that had carried stormwater away from both our yards for years. I told him that. Again. Brad shrugged and said, "It's my property. I can pour concrete wherever I want." Then he added that if my runoff kept making the neighborhood look bad, he might have to report me to the HOA. That was when I stopped talking, because Brad did not know what I had already found in the county records. He did not know the subdivision plat showed a drainage and utility easement running exactly where his patio now sat. He did not know the old access point he covered with concrete was not decorative, not optional, and not his to bury. 2 days later, the county inspector stood in that same backyard with the easement map in one hand and Brad's HOA approval email in the other. Brad smiled like he still had the upper hand. The inspector looked at the slab, then at the standing water still staining my yard, and asked one simple question. "Where is your permit for covering a drainage easement?" Brad said the HOA approved it. The inspector did not even blink. HOA approval does not override county drainage requirements. Then he took a can of marking paint, walked onto Brad's perfect new patio, and sprayed a bright orange line straight across the concrete. "That drainage line is under here," he said, "and if this slab is blocking it, this patio is coming out." Brad's smile disappeared so fast I almost missed it. I did not move into that neighborhood looking for a fight. I moved there because the house felt quiet. It was not the biggest house in the subdivision. It did not have stone columns, a 3-car garage, or one of those outdoor kitchens people like Brad Collins brag about at HOA meetings. It was a simple 1-story home with white trim, a narrow front porch, and a backyard that sloped gently toward the side fence before flattening out near a line of river rocks. That slope was one of the reasons I bought it. The inspector had pointed it out during the home inspection, back when I was still walking through the rooms trying to imagine my furniture there. He stood in the backyard after a light rain, looked at the ground, and said the drainage was actually well designed for an older subdivision. Water moved away from the foundation, crossed the low side of the yard, and flowed toward a drainage line that ran near the property boundary. At the time, I barely understood what he meant. I just knew he sounded pleased, and after weeks of looking at houses with cracked driveways, wet basements, and mystery stains on ceilings, I was grateful for anything that sounded like good news. Later, at closing, the title packet included a subdivision plat and a note about a drainage and utility easement along the side lot line. My real estate agent explained it in plain English. The easement meant that part of the land near the boundary had to remain accessible because stormwater and utility lines served more than one property. It did not mean strangers could use my yard whenever they wanted, and it did not mean I owned Brad's land. It meant the drainage path had to stay open. I put those papers in a folder and never thought about them again. For the first 2 years, that system worked exactly the way it was supposed to. When it rained, water would gather for a little while in the shallow swale near the side of the yard, then move out slowly and disappear through the drainage line. It was never dramatic. It never reached the house. It never threatened the basement door. The grass near the swale stayed a little greener than the rest of the yard, and I built my flower beds far enough away because I knew that strip needed to breathe. That backyard became my favorite part of the house. I planted hydrangeas along the back fence. I put in a small stone path with my own hands over 3 weekends. I bought 2 cheap patio chairs, then later replaced them with better ones after saving up. On summer evenings, I would sit outside with a glass of iced tea and listen to the neighborhood settle down after dinner. It was not fancy, but it was peaceful. And peace was what I wanted. The HOA was strict, but at first it was predictable. They sent letters if trash cans stayed out too long. They complained if grass got too tall. They had rules about fence stains, mailbox colors, and whether a garden hose could be visible from the street. I thought some of it was ridiculous, but I followed the rules because I did not want trouble. I paid my dues on time. I answered emails politely. I kept my yard clean. Then Brad Collins bought the house next door. Brad arrived with 2 moving trucks, a black SUV, and the kind of confidence that made it seem like he believed the entire block had been waiting for him. Within a month, he had introduced himself to every board member, joined the neighborhood social committee, and started talking about all the upgrades he planned to make. He was especially close with Denise Harper, the HOA president. Denise was one of those people who treated the HOA handbook like a weapon when she disliked someone, and like a suggestion when she liked them. If an older resident planted flowers half a foot too close to the sidewalk, Denise noticed. If Brad parked a contractor trailer in his driveway for 3 days, Denise called it temporary improvement activity. Brad loved that. He talked constantly about property values. He said the neighborhood needed fresh energy. He said too many people had let their yards become boring. At first, I just smiled and let him talk. I had no reason to fight him. He was allowed to improve his house. I was allowed to enjoy mine. Then he started talking about the patio. He wanted a huge concrete patio behind his house, with a built-in outdoor kitchen, a fire pit, and a covered seating area. He described it like a resort. He said it would make his backyard the best one on the street. I told him it sounded nice, but I also mentioned the drainage easement near the sideline. He waved his hand like I had brought up something beneath him. "My contractor knows what he's doing," he said. I told him it might be worth checking the county records before pouring anything permanent. Brad smiled. Not friendly. Amused. "OA already likes the idea," he said. "Denise said it'll be good for the neighborhood." That was when I realized Brad thought HOA approval was the same thing as legal permission. And if you have ever dealt with someone who believes a handshake from the HOA can erase a county easement, drop your thoughts in the comments, because people like Brad are exactly why homeowners need to read the paperwork before the concrete truck shows up. A few days later, I looked out my kitchen window and saw workers marking the ground behind Brad's house. The flags were not near his back door. They were near the drainage swale, right where the water had always escaped, right where the easement map said nothing permanent was supposed to go. And that was the first time I felt that quiet little backyard stop feeling peaceful. The concrete truck arrived on a Friday morning before I had even finished my coffee. I heard it before I saw it, that heavy diesel rumble rolling through the cul-de-sac, followed by the sharp beep of a truck backing up. When I looked through the kitchen window, Brad's driveway was full of workers. One man was carrying wooden forms. Another was dragging a hose across the grass. A third was using a shovel to scrape away the low strip of ground where rainwater had always moved between our yards. That strip was not pretty. It was not something anyone would point out during a backyard tour, but it had a job. Every time it rained, water moved through that shallow swale, slipped toward the drainage line, and disappeared before it could reach either house. Brad's crew was flattening it. I went outside before the first load of concrete came down the chute. Brad was standing near the back of his house with his hands on his hips, watching like a man supervising the construction of a private resort. He had sunglasses on, even though the sky was cloudy, and when he saw me coming, his face tightened immediately. I kept my voice calm. "Brad, did the county approve this? That area is part of the drainage easement." He sighed like I had interrupted him to complain about the color of his patio furniture. "We already went over this," he said. "It's on my property." "I'm not saying it isn't your property," I said. "I'm saying there's an easement. That means you can't block drainage or cover access without approval." One of the workers looked up at that. Brad noticed and got louder. "My contractor knows what he's doing. The HOA knows what I'm doing. Denise said it looks great. You need to stop trying to police my yard." I turned to the contractor and asked if he had seen the easement map. He wiped one hand on his jeans and looked uncomfortable for half a second before Brad cut in. "Don't answer him," Brad said. "He's not paying you." That was my second warning. The first had been the flags near the swale. The second was the way Brad did not want anyone discussing paperwork in front of the crew. I told him one more time that there was a drainage line under that area and that covering it could send water back toward my foundation. Brad laughed. Actually laughed. Water finds a way, he said. Maybe fix your yard instead of blaming mine. Then he turned his back on me. A few minutes later, the chute swung into place, and wet concrete began pouring into the forms. There is something strangely final about concrete. Dirt can be moved. Grass can grow back. Gravel can be shoveled away. But once concrete starts spreading, smooth and gray and heavy, it feels like a decision hardening in real time. I stood near my fence and watched them bury the low drainage path under a slab that was far wider than anything Brad had described. It ran from the back of his house across most of the yard, then pushed toward the property line like a wall. The workers smoothed it with long boards, sealed the edges, and built a raised border along the side closest to me. That border was the part that made my stomach drop. It was only a few inches high, but it was enough to change the flow. Water that used to cross through the swale would now hit that concrete edge and stop, or worse, turn back toward my yard. I took photos from my side of the fence, not dramatic ones, clear ones, the forms, the chute, the workers, the raised border, the area where the old grass strip had been scraped away. Brad saw me taking pictures and shook his head. "You're obsessed," he called. I did not answer. By the end of the day, the patio was finished. Smooth concrete, clean edges, a wide rectangle that looked expensive and permanent. Brad posted a photo of it in the neighborhood Facebook group before sunset with a caption about upgrading outdoor living. Denise Harper commented with 3 clapping emojis. The next morning, I received an email from the HOA. It was not a request for information. It was not a neutral reminder. It was a warning. Denise wrote that the association had received a complaint that I was interfering with an approved home improvement project. She said residents were expected to respect each other's property rights and avoid harassing contractors. She also said continued disruptive behavior could result in a formal violation notice. I sat at my kitchen table and stared at the words, "respect each other's property rights," until they almost made me laugh. Brad had just poured concrete over a drainage easement, and the HOA was warning me, not him. Me, I replied carefully. I explained again that my concern was not cosmetic. It was about drainage, county easement access, and potential water damage. I asked the HOA to provide the approval documents, the site plan Brad submitted, and any confirmation that the county had reviewed the drainage impact. Denise did not send the documents. She sent one sentence. The HOA has approved the improvement based on the information provided by the homeowner. That told me everything. They had not checked. They had not asked. They had simply believed Brad, because Brad was the kind of homeowner they liked. For 3 days, nothing happened. The patio cured. Brad's workers came back and installed anchor points for a future outdoor kitchen. They stacked boxes near the back door and measured for a covered frame. Brad walked around the slab like he was admiring a monument to himself. Then the rain came. It started just after midnight, slow at first, tapping against the windows. By 2 in the morning, it was steady. By 4, it was pounding so hard the gutters sounded like they were full of gravel. I woke up because my sump pump was running too often. At first, I thought I was imagining it. During heavy rain, the pump came on sometimes. That was normal, but this was different. It would kick on, drain, stop for a few seconds, then kick on again, over and over, too fast. I went downstairs and felt cold air near the basement door. Then I saw water pushing under the threshold, not pouring in yet. Not a disaster yet, but enough to make my chest go tight. I grabbed towels, then sandbags from the garage, then a flashlight. When I opened the back door, rain slapped me in the face. My backyard was no longer draining. It was filling. Water had swallowed the stone path I built by hand. My hydrangeas were standing in brown water up to their lower leaves. The shallow swale that used to carry runoff away had become a pond, and the water was pressing back toward my house because Brad's raised concrete edge blocked the path out. I aimed the flashlight toward his yard. His patio was clean, dry in patches under the new cover. The water was not moving across it. It was piling against it. I dragged sandbags toward the basement entrance, slipping twice in the mud. My shoes sank into the lawn. Rain ran down my neck. The sump pump kept humming behind me through the wall. Then Brad's backlight came on. He stepped outside under his patio cover wearing sweatpants and a hoodie, holding a mug like he had come out to enjoy the storm. He looked at my flooded yard, then at me struggling with the sandbags, and he smiled. "You should really fix your drainage," he called. I looked at him through the rain. "You blocked the drainage line," I said. He lifted the mug slightly, like he was making a toast. "My patio is fine. Looks like your yard is the problem." I cannot describe how badly I wanted to shout at him. I wanted to tell him exactly what kind of person watches a neighbor's house nearly flood and treats it like a joke. I wanted to remind him that I had warned him before the concrete came, before the forms went up, before his contractor buried the swale under a permanent slab. But standing there in the dark, soaked and furious, I understood something. Brad wanted an argument. An argument would make this about personalities, about tone, about whether I had been rude, about whether he felt attacked. So I gave him nothing. I pulled out my phone and recorded the water. I recorded the flower beds underwater. I recorded the stone path disappearing. I recorded the water line near the basement door. I recorded Brad's patio edge blocking the flow. I recorded Brad standing dry under his cover, telling me my yard was the problem. Then I went back to moving sandbags. The next morning the damage was obvious. The mulch had washed out of the flower beds. The soil near the foundation was soft. The stone path had shifted in 2 places. Mud covered the lower patio. The basement had stayed mostly dry, but only because the sump pump had run all night and the sandbags held long enough. Brad's patio looked perfect. That made it worse. He came outside around 9 while I was taking photos. He looked over the fence and said, "You know, if all that water runs into the common area, the HOA might make you correct it." I stared at him for a long second. Then I said, "Brad, you covered a drainage easement." He rolled his eyes. "Prove it." So I did. That afternoon, I reviewed my backyard camera footage from the day before the pour. I expected to find videos of the forms, the workers, maybe the truck. What I did not expect was a clip of Brad's contractor kneeling near the ground by the swale, lifting a small round access cap I had never paid much attention to before. He looked at it, called Brad over. Brad bent down. The contractor said something I could not hear clearly, but then Brad looked toward my yard and shook his head. A few minutes later, the cap was gone from view. By the next day, concrete covered that exact spot. That was when the flood stopped being an accident. Brad had not just changed the surface. He had buried the access point. And the next time he told someone he had no idea there was drainage under that patio, I was going to have the video ready. The morning after the flood, I did not knock on Brad's door. I did not call Denise. I did not send another emotional email to the HOA asking them to please be reasonable. I had already learned what happened when I tried to be reasonable with people who thought confidence was the same thing as permission. Brad would dismiss me. Denise would protect him. The HOA would turn my concern into a behavior problem. And somehow, the person standing ankle-deep in stormwater would become the one accused of making trouble. So I stopped trying to convince them. I started building a file. First, I took photos of everything before the sun dried the evidence away. The muddy water line against the basement door, the mulch washed out of the flower beds, the softened soil near the foundation, the shifted stones in the walkway, the place where the swale used to drain before Brad's concrete edge turned it into a dam. Then I took videos. I walked slowly from the back porch to the side yard, narrating the date, the time, and what I was seeing. I showed the water still trapped in the low spot. I showed Brad's patio sitting clean and raised on the other side. I showed the exact direction the runoff used to travel before the slab blocked it. After that, I went inside, made coffee I barely drank, and pulled out the folder from when I bought the house. It was the same folder I had ignored for years. Deed, title documents, inspection report, HOA packet, subdivision plat, closing disclosures. All the papers that felt boring when nothing was wrong, and priceless the moment someone tried to pretend the land had no history. The drainage easement was there, clear as day. It ran along the side boundary, covering part of the drainage path between Brad's lot and mine. The language was not dramatic, but it was firm. Drainage and utility access had to remain unobstructed. Permanent structures could not interfere with the function of the easement. Owners were responsible for maintaining grading and not altering water flow onto adjoining properties. I sat at my kitchen table and read that paragraph 3 times. Then I opened the county GIS map. The online map showed the same easement line, not something old and forgotten, not a vague note from a previous owner. It was still recorded. still active, still tied to the land. Brad could buy the house, paint the walls, plant new shrubs, and pour whatever dreams he wanted into his backyard, but he could not erase an easement because he did not like where it was. Next, I searched the county permit database using Brad's address. There was a landscaping permit for minor work. There was an electrical permit application started for future outdoor lighting, but there was no permit for a large concrete patio, no grading approval, no stormwater review, no record showing the county had approved covering the drainage access point. That was when I realized the HOA approval email Denise kept waving around was not just weak. It was almost meaningless. I called a local drainage contractor named Eric Mason, someone who specialized in stormwater problems and foundation drainage. He came out the next afternoon with a level, a measuring rod, and the tired expression of a man who had seen too many homeowners ruin drainage systems with pretty projects. He did not say much at first. He walked the yard slowly, checked the slope, looked at the concrete edge, studied the soggy swale, and asked me where the water used to go before the patio was poured. I showed him old photos from spring. In the background of one picture, before Brad's project, the drainage strip was visible. Grass dipped slightly toward the side. The river rocks marked the low channel. There was no standing water near my foundation. Eric looked from the photo to the patio and shook his head. "This slab changed the flow," he said. "And if there's an access point under there, that's a serious problem." I showed him the camera clip of Brad's contractor lifting the small cap near the swale before the pour. Eric leaned closer to the screen, watched it twice, and said, "That looks like a cleanout or drainage access. They should not have buried that." He wrote a short inspection summary for me. It stated that the new concrete patio appeared to obstruct the existing drainage path, that the raised edge was redirecting water toward my property, and that the covered access point needed to be reviewed by the county stormwater department. That report became another piece of the file. Then I downloaded the camera footage, not just the dramatic clip, all of it. I saved the day the workers scraped the swale flat, the day they installed the wooden forms, the moment the contractor lifted the access cap, the moment Brad walked over and looked at it, the concrete pour, the raised edge being finished, the rainstorm, Brad standing under his cover telling me to fix my drainage. Every file got labeled by date and time. Every email went into a folder. Every photo got backed up twice. I printed the HOA warning from Denise and highlighted the part where she accused me of interfering with an approved project. Beside it, I printed the county map showing the drainage easement. The contrast was almost ridiculous. One paper showed the HOA acting powerful. The other showed they had no idea what they were approving. I emailed Denise again, but this time I wrote like every sentence might be read by an attorney, an inspector, or a judge. I stated that Brad's concrete patio appeared to obstruct a recorded drainage and utility easement, that the recent storm caused water to pool against my foundation, and that I was requesting all HOA documents related to Brad's approval, including drawings, site plans, contractor information, and any drainage review. Her response was careful but cold. She said the HOA had approved the patio based on appearance and community standards. She said drainage concerns between adjacent owners were private matters. She said I should avoid making accusations without proper authority. Proper authority. That phrase almost made me smile, because that was exactly what I was about to bring in. I called the county stormwater office first. The woman who answered asked for the address, the subdivision name, and the easement location. When I mentioned standing water near the foundation after a new patio covered the drainage path, her voice changed. She asked me to upload photos, the plat map, the HOA email, the contractor summary, and any footage showing the access point being covered. Then she gave me a case number. A real one, not an HOA complaint number that Denise could bury in a board folder, a county stormwater case number tied to public records. After that, I called a real estate attorney named Karen Holt. I expected her to tell me this was too small or too complicated, but she did not. She listened quietly while I explained the patio, the flood, the easement, the missing permit, the HOA warning, and the camera footage. Then she said, "This is not about whether Brad likes his patio. This is about whether he interfered with a recorded easement and caused water damage." She asked me to send everything. I sent the file that night. By the next afternoon, Karen had reviewed enough to give me a plan. She said we would not start with a lawsuit. Not yet. First, we would preserve evidence, notify Brad in writing, notify the HOA, notify the county, and give Brad a chance to correct the violation before further damage occurred. But she also said something that stayed with me. If he was told about the drainage issue before the pour, and he buried an access point anyway, that will matter. That was when I went back to my closing documents one more time. I was not looking for my own paperwork this time. I was looking for subdivision records attached to the property history. Hidden in the title packet was a reference to the original development restrictions. I searched the county recorder's site and found the full document. And there it was, a recorded restriction for every lot along that drainage line. No owner could construct, place, or maintain permanent improvements over the drainage easement without written county approval. No owner could alter grading in a way that redirected stormwater onto another lot. Access points had to remain available for inspection and maintenance. But the real surprise came from a separate document attached to Brad's lot. When Brad bought the house, the title company had issued a notice listing the drainage and utility easement as an exception. It had been part of his closing record. He had been told, in writing, that the easement existed. He could not claim he never knew. I printed that document slowly, page by page, listening to the machine hum in my office. For the first time since the flood, I felt the anger settle into something colder and more useful. Brad had laughed in the rain because he thought the water was my problem. Denise had warned me because she thought HOA approval ended the discussion. But sitting in front of me now were the documents that told the real story. The easement map, the county GIS printout, the missing permit search, the drainage contractor's report, the camera footage, the HOA emails, the title notice, the recorded restriction. I was no longer asking Brad to be considerate. I was no longer asking Denise to be fair. I was preparing to let the county explain what concrete cannot cover. The legal turn came from one sentence buried in a document Brad probably never read. It was not dramatic at first. It was not printed in red. It was not stamped across the page like a warning. It was just a plain paragraph in the recorded subdivision restrictions, written in the kind of dry language most people skip during closing. No owner shall construct, place, pour, or maintain any permanent improvement over a recorded drainage or utility easement without written approval from the county. I read that sentence at my desk with the flood photos spread around me like evidence from a crime scene. Then I read it again, because that was the difference between a neighbor being annoying and a neighbor violating a recorded property restriction. Brad had not just poured a patio I disliked. He had poured a permanent concrete slab over an easement that was supposed to remain open for drainage access. And according to the county records, that restriction did not disappear because the HOA liked the way his backyard looked. It ran with the land. That phrase mattered. Karen, my attorney, explained it clearly. An easement is not a personal favor between neighbors. It is a recorded property interest, tied to the land itself. When Brad bought the house, he bought it subject to that easement. He did not get to pretend it was optional because the concrete was on his side of the fence. Then Karen found the second document. It was part of Brad's title record from when he purchased the home. Listed under exceptions was the exact drainage and utility easement I had found in my own closing packet. Same subdivision, same recorded instrument number, same side lot line, same restriction against blocking drainage or covering access. That meant Brad had been notified. Maybe he ignored it, maybe he never read it. Maybe he assumed easements were just tiny legal words that did not matter once he wanted a fire pit and an outdoor kitchen. But legally, he could not say the easement had been hidden from him. Karen drafted the demand letter that afternoon. It was not emotional. It did not call Brad arrogant. It did not mention him laughing in the rain or telling me to fix my yard while water pushed toward my basement door. It did not need to. The letter stated the facts. Brad had constructed a large concrete patio over a recorded drainage and utility easement. The patio appeared to block or obstruct the natural drainage path serving multiple lots. The work had altered grading near the shared side boundary. The county permit search did not show approval for the patio, grading changes, or obstruction of the drainage access point. After the patio was poured, stormwater collected in my yard, damaged landscaping, shifted my walkway, and threatened my foundation. Then Karen attached the documents Brad could not talk his way around: the county easement map, the recorded subdivision restriction, the permit database search, the drainage contractor's report, photos before the patio, photos after the patio, video of the flood, video of Brad's contractor lifting the access cap before the pour, the HOA warning email accusing me of interfering, and the title notice showing Brad's property had been purchased subject to the same drainage easement. The demand was simple. Brad had to stop further construction, halt the outdoor kitchen installation, preserve all records, provide contractor information, produce any county permits he claimed to have, restore the drainage access, and pay for the damage caused by the flooding. If he refused, Karen would forward the evidence to county stormwater enforcement, building code enforcement, and his insurance company. She sent the letter by certified mail and email. Brad's response came the next morning. Not through an attorney, not with permits, not with a drainage report. Just Brad, standing in his backyard, waving the letter over the fence like it was junk mail. "You hired a lawyer because my patio is nicer than your yard?" he shouted. I was standing near the flower beds, cutting away dead hydrangea stems ruined by the floodwater. I did not walk toward him. "Please respond through counsel," I said. That made him furious. He called the easement nonsense. He said nobody from the county had ever cared before. He said the HOA approved his project and that Denise had already told him he was fine. He said I was trying to punish him for improving his property. Then he said the sentence that probably hurt him most later. "It's concrete now. Nobody is going to make me break it apart." I looked at the slab behind him. Smooth, expensive, permanent. Or at least he thought it was. 2 days later, county stormwater called. The inspector assigned to the case was named Rebecca Sloan, and she did not sound impressed by HOA politics. She asked whether the water had reached the foundation. She asked if I had photos showing the drainage path before the patio. She asked if the access point was visible before construction. She asked whether Brad had continued work after being notified of the easement issue. I answered each question and uploaded the evidence to the county portal. That same afternoon, Karen sent a copy of the demand letter and evidence packet to Brad's insurance carrier. She did not claim they owed anything yet. She simply put them on notice that their insured had constructed an unpermitted improvement over a recorded drainage easement after being warned about drainage concerns. That changed the tone fast. Suddenly, Brad was not yelling across the fence. He was avoiding eye contact. Denise emailed me 3 days later, and for the first time, her message did not sound smug. She wrote that the HOA had only reviewed Brad's patio for visual compliance and that any county drainage issue was outside the association's authority. She said the board encouraged all residents to resolve matters respectfully. Respectfully. That was a very different word from interference. Karen read the email and said, "They are backing away from him." But the biggest legal reversal came from the HOA's own rules. Karen found a clause in the architectural guidelines that said, approval from the HOA did not authorize any improvement that violated county code, drainage easements, utility access, setback rules, grading requirements, or recorded restrictions. Another clause said owners were solely responsible for verifying permits and easement limitations before beginning construction. In plain English, Denise's approval gave Brad nothing. It did not legalize the patio. It did not erase the easement. It did not protect him from county enforcement. And it did not make me responsible for the water his concrete had redirected. The board had spent weeks acting like HOA approval was the final word. But their own documents said the opposite. The HOA could approve the appearance of a patio. It could not approve burying a drainage access point. It could not approve redirecting stormwater onto another property. It could not approve a permanent slab over a recorded easement without county authorization. That was when the power shifted. Brad had started this thinking the fight was about taste. He had a beautiful patio. I had a wet yard. Denise liked his project. The HOA warned me. In his mind, that made him the winner. But now the question was not whether the patio looked good. The question was whether it was legal. And every document pointed in the same direction. No county permit. No drainage review. No grading approval. A recorded easement. A title notice. A buried access point. A flooded yard. A contractor report. A demand letter. And a stormwater case number. When Rebecca Sloan scheduled the site inspection, she asked that Brad, the HOA, and anyone representing the contractor be present. She also asked me not to disturb the flooded area or move any remaining markers near the swale. Brad received the county notice the same day. For the first time since the concrete truck arrived, he knocked on my door. I opened it but left the storm door closed. He stood on my porch, no sunglasses, no coffee mug, no smirk. "Look," he said, "maybe this got a little out of hand." I said nothing. He tried again. "I don't want inspectors crawling all over my property because of some technicality." There it was, a technicality. The easement was a technicality. The flood was a technicality. The buried access point was a technicality. My foundation was a technicality. The documents he ignored were technicalities only because they stood between him and what he wanted. I told him Karen would handle all communication. His face hardened. "You're really going to make me tear up a brand new patio?" I looked past him toward the side yard, where the grass was still muddy from the storm. "No, Brad," I said. "The county is going to decide what happens to the patio." That scared him more than anger would have, because Brad could argue with me. He could charm Denise. He could mock my yard, wave an HOA email around, and act like being loud made him right. But he could not bully a recorded easement. He could not sweet-talk a permit database. And he could not stand in front of a county stormwater inspector with a buried drainage line under his concrete and pretend the water was just confused. The inspection was set for the following Tuesday, and by then, Brad's perfect patio had already stopped looking like an upgrade. It looked like evidence. The county inspection happened at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. By 9:30, I had already taken fresh photos of the yard. The grass was still soft near the sideline, and there was a dark stain in the soil where the last stormwater had sat too long before slowly sinking into the ground. My hydrangeas looked beaten down, the stone path still had 2 uneven sections, and the basement door had a faint, muddy line across the bottom from where the water had pushed against it. I did not touch any of it. Karen told me not to clean up too much before the inspector arrived. She said damage tells a story, and if you erase the story too early, the person who caused it gets to pretend nothing happened. So I left the yard exactly as it was. Brad did not. By the time the county truck pulled up, Brad had swept his patio, moved the boxes for the outdoor kitchen into the garage, and placed 2 large planters near the side edge of the concrete like he was trying to make the slab look decorative instead of suspicious. He was standing outside in a polo shirt, arms crossed, trying to look relaxed. Denise Harper arrived 5 minutes later. That told me everything. Brad had invited the HOA president, probably expecting her to back him up again. She stepped out of her car holding a folder, but she did not look as confident as she had in her emails. The moment she saw Karen standing beside me with a binder full of documents, her expression changed. Rebecca Sloan from County Stormwater arrived first. She wore work boots, a county vest, and carried a rolled easement map under one arm. Behind her came a building inspector named Mark Delaney, who had been asked to review the patio, the grading change, and the missing permit issue. Eric Mason, the drainage contractor I had hired, came too, because Karen wanted someone there who could explain the water flow in plain language. Rebecca introduced herself to everyone, then set the tone immediately. "We're here to look at drainage function, easement access, grading changes, and permit compliance," she said. "We are not here to settle HOA disagreements." Brad's jaw tightened. Denise looked down at her folder. Rebecca started with the map. She unrolled it on the hood of her county truck and placed small weights on the corners. The recorded drainage and utility easement was clearly marked along the side boundary between Brad's lot and mine. She asked Brad if he was aware of the easement when he poured the patio. Brad gave a half shrug. "I knew there was something in the paperwork," he said, "but this is my yard. The patio doesn't hurt anything." Rebecca did not argue. She just wrote that down. Then she walked the site. I watched her follow the line from the back of my yard toward Brad's patio. She looked at the low swale, the watermarks, the softened ground near my foundation, and the raised edge of Brad's concrete. Eric explained how the drainage used to move through the low channel and how the patio edge now forced water backward into my yard. Brad interrupted him almost immediately. "That's speculation," he said. "His yard has always had drainage problems." Eric looked at him calmly. "Then you should have before and after drainage documentation," he said. Brad did not answer. Karen handed Rebecca printed photos from before Brad's patio was poured. They showed my yard after ordinary rain, damp but draining, with no standing water against the house. Then she handed over the photos from the flood night. Water across the flower beds, water against the walkway, water near the basement door. Rebecca studied them carefully. Then I showed her the camera footage. First the workers scraping the swale flat, then the wooden forms being placed across the drainage path, then the contractor lifting the small access cap. That was the moment Mark, the building inspector, leaned closer. "Pause that," he said. I paused it. The screen showed Brad standing beside the contractor, looking down at the exposed cap near the drainage line before the concrete pour. Nobody could pretend it had been invisible. Nobody could pretend there had been no warning sign in the ground. Mark looked at Brad. "What happened to that access point?" Brad folded his arms tighter. "I don't know. Ask the contractor," Rebecca said. "But you were standing there." Brad's face flushed. Denise tried to step in. She said the HOA had approved the patio as an aesthetic improvement based on Brad's application, and that the association could not be expected to investigate every underground condition. Rebecca turned to her and said, "The HOA approval is not relevant to county drainage compliance." Denise stopped talking. Mark asked Brad for the patio permit. Brad handed him the HOA email. Mark looked at it for maybe 3 seconds. "This is not a permit," he said. Brad said his contractor told him a basic patio did not need one. Mark replied, "A patio over a drainage easement with grading changes and a covered access point is not basic." That was when the whole mood changed. Rebecca took out a can of orange marking paint. She used the easement map, the visible grading, and the footage of the access cap to estimate the drainage line location. Then she walked onto Brad's clean concrete patio and sprayed a line across it. Brad stepped forward like she had scratched a luxury car. "Hey, what are you doing?" "Marking the drainage path," she said. The orange line cut across the smooth gray slab, bright and ugly and impossible to ignore. For weeks, Brad had treated that patio like proof he had won. Now the county had turned it into evidence with one stripe of paint. Rebecca crouched near the edge, checked the raised border, and said the slab appeared to obstruct drainage and cover required access. Mark confirmed that no permit existed for the work as built, no grading approval had been issued, and no stormwater review had been completed. Brad tried one last time to shift the blame. "This is because he complained," he said, pointing at me. "If he hadn't made a big deal out of some water, nobody would care." Rebecca looked at the flood photos again, then at the easement map. "County easements exist, so water does not become somebody's private problem," she said. After that, she issued a notice of violation. Brad had to submit a corrective plan. He had to stop all further outdoor kitchen work. He had to expose the buried drainage access point. He had to remove any portion of the patio obstructing the drainage easement unless an engineer could prove a compliant alternative, and even then, the county had to approve it first. He also faced daily fines if he ignored the deadline. Mark added a separate building notice for the unpermitted work and grading changes. Brad looked like he wanted to argue, but for once, there was nobody in authority willing to confuse confidence with compliance. The HOA emergency meeting happened the following week. Denise tried to keep it controlled. She called it a neighbor drainage concern and said the board wanted to avoid assigning blame, but by then, copies of the county notice had circulated through the neighborhood. People were angry, not just because Brad's patio caused flooding, but because the HOA had warned me instead of checking the rules. I brought my binder. Karen sat beside me. I did not give a speech. I simply laid out the timeline. I warned Brad before the pour. He poured anyway. I warned the HOA. Denise defended him. The first storm flooded my yard. County records confirmed the easement. The permit database showed no approval. The camera showed the access point before it was buried. The county marked the patio and issued violations. One homeowner stood up and asked Denise why her mailbox color had been cited within 48 hours. But Brad's unpermitted concrete patio over a drainage easement had been praised as an improvement. Another asked whether HOA approvals were being given based on friendships instead of documents. Then someone else asked the question that ended Denise's control of the room. If the HOA can threaten him for asking about drainage, how do any of us know the board won't punish us for protecting our own property? Denise had no clean answer. The board voted that night to withdraw the warning against me. suspend Brad's architectural approval pending county compliance, and revise the review process for any patio, retaining wall, pool, fence, or landscaping project near an easement. Brad left before the meeting ended. But the worst part for him came later. His insurance company sent a letter stating that coverage for certain damages could be limited or denied if the loss resulted from unpermitted construction, intentional obstruction of drainage, or work performed after notice of a recorded easement. Karen received a copy because she had submitted the claim packet. That was when Brad stopped calling it a misunderstanding, because now it was not just me saying the patio was a problem. It was the county, the building department, the stormwater inspector, the HOA's own revised record, and his insurance company. For the first time since that concrete truck came into our cul-de-sac, Brad was not standing above the problem with a cup of coffee in his hand. He was standing under it, and every official document pointed down at the same bright orange line across his brand new patio. Brad lasted 9 days before he gave in. For 9 days, the orange line stayed across his brand new patio like a scar. Every time I looked out my kitchen window, I could see it cutting through the smooth gray concrete, running exactly where the county said the drainage path had to remain accessible. Brad tried covering part of it with a planter the first afternoon, but Rebecca Sloan came back, photographed the obstruction, and reminded him in writing that he was already under a notice of violation. After that, the planter disappeared. The outdoor kitchen never went in. The boxes stayed in his garage. The covered frame he had bragged about was never installed. The fire pit, the built-in counter, the whole backyard resort he had described to half the neighborhood, all of it stopped at a concrete slab with a county violation attached to it. At first, Brad tried to fight it through paperwork. He hired a contractor to write a letter saying the patio was unlikely to affect drainage. The county rejected it because it did not include engineering, did not address the buried access point, and did not explain why my yard flooded immediately after the slab was poured. Then he tried submitting a revised plan that left most of the patio in place and added a narrow drain channel along the edge. Rebecca rejected that too. The easement required access. The grading had to be corrected. The buried drainage point had to be exposed. A decorative trench beside the slab was not enough. By the end of the second week, a concrete cutting crew arrived. This time, nobody started before sunrise. Nobody dragged tools across my yard. Nobody laughed over the fence. Brad stood on his back porch with his arms crossed, while the workers marked sections of the slab, fired up the saw, and began cutting into the patio he had once acted like nobody could touch. The sound was brutal. Concrete dust rose in pale clouds. The saw screamed through the slab. Chunks were broken loose, lifted, and hauled away piece by piece. The part covering the drainage easement came out first, then the raised edge that had dammed the water, then the section over the access point. And there it was, the small round drainage access cap, buried under Brad's perfect patio, exactly where my camera footage had shown it before the pour. Nobody said much when it appeared. They did not need to. Brad had spent weeks acting like the easement was imaginary. Now the thing he buried was sitting in the open, surrounded by broken concrete and county inspectors. The county required him to restore the grade along the drainage path, reopen access, and submit a drainage correction plan before doing any future backyard work. He had to pay the concrete removal crew, the revised contractor fees, county reinspection fees, and a citation for the unpermitted grading change. Because he missed the first correction deadline, he also paid daily fines until the work was completed. Then came my side of it. Through Karen, Brad agreed to reimburse the drainage contractor's inspection, the soil replacement near my foundation, the repair of my stone walkway, the replacement of the damaged hydrangeas, the basement door ceiling check, and a portion of my attorney fees. He did not do it because he suddenly became generous. He did it because his insurance company did not want the case getting worse, and because the evidence made the timeline painfully clear. I warned him. He ignored it. The HOA protected him. The rain proved the damage. The county proved the violation. The HOA had to clean up its own mess too. They withdrew the warning they had sent me and removed every note from my account about harassing contractors. At the next board meeting, Denise tried to explain that she had only wanted to encourage property improvements, but the room was done listening. Residents asked why she had defended Brad without checking permits. why she had treated drainage concerns like personal complaints, and why a board that could measure grass height to the inch could not read an easement map. Denise lost her position as HOA president at the next election. After that, the association changed its approval process. Any patio, pool, retaining wall, fence, major landscaping project, or outdoor structure near a drainage or utility easement now required a county permit check and written confirmation before the HOA would even review it. It was the kind of rule that should have existed before a concrete truck ever rolled onto our street. As for my yard, it took time. The grass had to be regraded near the swale, the flower beds had to be rebuilt, the stone path had to be leveled again. For a while, every dark cloud made me uneasy, and every heavy rain sent me to the back door with a flashlight. But the first storm after the repair told me everything I needed to know. The water gathered in the low channel, moved away from the foundation, passed through the drainage path, and disappeared exactly the way it used to. No pond against the basement door, no panic at 4 in the morning, no Brad standing dry under a patio cover, laughing while my yard filled up. Just water doing what the land records always said it was supposed to do. Brad never apologized. People like him rarely do. But he stopped talking to me over the fence. He stopped posting about upgrades, and every time he walked past the section of patched concrete where his dream patio had been cut apart, he had to see the reminder that private property does not mean unlimited power. That was the lesson he refused to learn until the county taught it to him. An easement is not a suggestion, a permit is not a decoration, and HOA approval does not magically erase county records just because the board president likes your project. I did not win because I yelled in the rain. I did not win because I had more money than Brad. I won because I took pictures, saved emails, pulled the plat map, checked the permit records, called the right experts, and let the documents speak louder than his arrogance. So if a neighbor ever tells you, "It's my property, I can do whatever I want," remember this story. Sometimes the most powerful thing on the land is not the person standing on it. It is the recorded line underneath it. If you were in my place, would you have waited for the county? Or would you have gone straight to court after the first flood? Leave your thoughts in the comments, hit like if this ending felt satisfying, and share this story with someone who needs to check the easements before pouring concrete. And if you want more HOA drama, where arrogant neighbors finally meet the paperwork they should have respected from the beginning, make sure you subscribe.